There he is. Eric
Hey,
Walsh, how are you?
man, it was a busy week this week here, man. Tell you what, I can't wait for our conversation tonight because I really need some pointers on how to get some better sleep after this.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Well, we're missing a couple of key components of our normal team. Those of you out who follow us faithfully know that Danette normally will introduce us. My name is Columbus Batiste. I'm an interventional cardiologist, and this is my partner in crime, Dr. Eric Walsh. For those of you who may not know him, there's not very many out there who don't know him. But you've been busy.
Man, it's busy times, man. Busy time, but it's all good. Sabbath is here, so I'm excited for the show. I'm really happy with the guest we have tonight.
Yes.
I follow him on MedCram and listen to his messages from places like Advent Hope. So just excited to have him on. I think this is going to be a great show.
All right. Well, let's bring him on. This is a friend, a colleague, a former co-medical student of mine from Loma Linda days. It is the Dr. Roger Seheult. There he is.
Hey,
hello,
everybody.
Sir.
Good to be here.
Yes, good to have you. Man, it's been, we were saying backstage, it's been nearly 30 years, I think, since I've seen you, or somewhere thereabouts, since about residency and everything.
Yeah, 20. I mean, I remember Columbus being on call. I can't remember if I was a medical student or an intern, but man, looked up to you. You were a very highly qualified. You knew your stuff, and
that's right.
Us little ducklings were just crowding around, just trying to lap up the information.
Dude, listen. I don't know about all that. All I know is that when I shared with a mutual colleague, I said, "Do you remember this guy? You remember him?" And she goes, "Oh, he was so smart." I said, "I know. I remember." I said, "He still is. He's breaking stuff down." So for those of you who don't know and haven't checked out MedCram, you have to check out MedCram.
Absolutely.
It is not just if you are a med student. This is if you are a human being who's interested in understanding more about science, understanding more about COVID, about everything on the face of the earth. I don't know if there's too many things you haven't talked about, Roger.
Well, thanks for those kind words. Yeah, we initially started out at MedCram trying to educate healthcare professionals, and then with COVID, never in the history that I can remember have so many people wanted to know so much about virology. So yeah. We expanded to that. I mean, you know how it is. It's usually a basketball player or a baseball player or some sports that captures the attention of the population. And this time it was a science topic that captured the attention of the world. And so obviously we wanted to make sure that we filled that void with correct information because there's so much false stuff out there.
And unfortunately, there's still a lot of really bad information. And you and I were on a couple of things together, actually, and caught heat for telling the truth, actually. So I appreciate that you were willing to stand up for the truth and try and save lives. Unfortunately, we know people who because they rejected some of these basic, simple things. There are people who have actually lost their lives. And so we will continue to fight the good fight, trying to tell the truth. I do want one quick thing. You on MedCram. Hopefully, we can even touch on it tonight a little bit. Your talk on light was profound. I first saw it on Advent Hope, and I said, if he did it here, there must be a bigger version of this, because I could tell they called you the night before you were on call, and they brought you in to speak down at the amphitheater. And so I said, I bet you there's, and sure enough, I found it. I was like, oh, this is mind blowing. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that as well tonight. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you are quadruple board certified. Tell us what you're board certified in, so it'll help us set up the talk for tonight.
Sure. Well, when I was a medical student and a resident in internal medicine, I made the decision that I want to be a pulmonary and critical care specialist. So as a result of that, I had to finish my boards in internal medicine and do a year of pulmonary, a year of research, and a year of critical care. So just by the nature of what I'm doing, I've got to be triple board certified. But I also wanted to go into sleep medicine, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. That I got to do that afterwards, doing sleep studies and then sitting for boards and passing that. But I'm a graduate of Loma Linda University, class of 2000, a couple of years behind Columbus, and I'm sure you, Eric.
Well, I was there. I was actually a resident when you graduated.
Yeah. It was good times. Southern California in the early 2000s there. Yeah. My wife is Betty. She's an internist. She also graduated from the residency there at Loma Linda. She's a graduate of UCLA. School of Medicine, and we have 3 kids. We live here in Yucaipa, Southern California, and I work at Beaver Medical Group, where I'm a pulmonary critical care physician.
Awesome.
Wow.
And it sounds like both of you have kids at Loma Linda Academy. Is that true?
We do. We've got all 3 of them there. My eldest is 17, and she's driving to school already. It's just how fast time flies.
Isn't it amazing? It's amazing just how time flies. It really truly does.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is this is very good. It's kind of full circle, being able to kind of come back after starting out our pathways to our career, and all 3 of us in terms of medicine, and really now trying to venture into educating the population about tools and methods in which practical things, you know what I mean? And that's really what our platform is about, practical things that everyone can take home and just really institute. And an area that I'll tell you, I never thought I'd have much of an interest in, but has increasing. Now, everyone knows I love nutrition. Now, I love talking about the components of nutrition, how it can impact every aspect of your body. But I would probably say my second one that I talk to almost every cardiac patient about is sleep.
Yeah.
Is sleep. It's one of the first things I always ask questions about is sleep, because I believe we have an epidemic of sleep deprivation in this country, and some disorders that are happening as a result of it. And so it's good. I'm glad we'll be able to kind of have this conversation. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I want to jump in and start talking about it. This is sleep. All 3 of us believe in the laws of health. And rest and sleep is one of the things we talk about, but really many times in my growing up, it's been glossed over, the importance of sleep. And I'll be honest with you, I think of all of the bad habits I have, this is probably the most stubborn. I'm going to bed super late, getting home from work 9, 10 o'clock at night, not taking time to unwind, finally getting to sleep, and have to get right back up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to go do it all over again. So, talk to us a little bit, first of all, about what happens when someone does not get enough sleep, chronically especially, but in general.
Yeah, not getting enough sleep has amazing effects. So first of all, let's define what enough sleep is. If we're talking about adults, we're looking at about 7 hours of sleep. So that's the bare minimum. The range is about 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night is the bare minimum recommendation from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. And if you're younger, if you're school age or you've got young kids, it's actually even higher than that. And the problem is that with living in urban areas and trying to get to work and getting a job, you've got to get up early to beat the traffic. And so you've got a hard stop there that you've got your alarm clock on, and you're working there throughout the whole day, and it's a long drive home. By the time you get home, there's dinner that has to be made, there's homework that has to be gone over, and it's very easy to push those quote unquote non-essential things further back and sacrifice sleep. Because what's sleep? In our society, sleep is viewed as something that is a weakness. If you've got to sleep, if somebody doesn't have to sleep and they can work, wow, that's amazing. We've got a very utilitarian type of society. And let's face it, we're on here with three of us docs. That it's really proposed and pushed forward in residency. Like, wow, you could do this. You didn't have to sleep, right? I stayed up all night. Give me my medal.
Yes. Forget residency. What about med school and even before med school, college, trying to get in,
college too.
So here's the thing. Like, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty about how this affects it, I think I can best demonstrate for you what is the issue with that by talking about a study that was done a couple of years ago where they took college students and they basically did an all-nighter with them. We did this in college, right? I didn't do it, but people did it. You stay up late, you study for your test because you got to test the next day. They actually studied 1,000 different levels of proteins and enzymes in just one night of doing an all-nighter. And 100 of those completely changed their peak values. And a lot of these proteins and enzymes were involved with glucose metabolism, with immunity, and specifically cancer-fighting immunity. I mean, just amazingly important proteins completely went out of sync. We're going to be talking about light and we're going to talk about sleep. Let me put it into a general concept. And it's this. Imagine your body is like a city. And you guys know, because we're all living here, well, some of us are living here in Southern California. If you want to drive into LA, it's not enough to know that you have to drive into LA. You got to know when you're driving into LA, because it can be a very pleasant experience or it can be a very bad experience. And it's, even though it's the same distance from where you are to where you have to go, that experience can be very different if that's happening at 5 o'clock in the evening versus 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Mm-hmm. Completely different experience. And that's what happens with the circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm has taken your body and said, here are a whole bunch of things that have to happen to keep this person going for a number of decades. And the way we're going to do this is at this time of the day, this is the kind of metabolism that we're going to have. This is the kind of breaking down we're going to have. This is the kind of building back better we're going to have. And here's the best time to eat. Here's the best time to sleep. Here's when we should be outside in the sun. Here's when, and if you think about this, we have very complicated systems today that do the same thing. A city doesn't work on the highways at rush hour, right? The city puts the Caltrans people out there in the middle of the night so that because there's no traffic. If your city is building things all the time and not repairing things that have damaged, you just have a bunch of tall skyscrapers that are big, but they maybe have repairs. In other words, you've got a lot of mass, but not a lot of quality. Same thing at like Disneyland, right? When you're going to get the gardeners in there, in the day when people are lined up for the rides, or at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's nobody there? When do you change out the cash registers? In the middle of the night. When do you do the inspections? In the middle of the night. So in other words, to keep a system going, there has to be downtime and on time. And the problem is that 500 years ago, 200 years ago, we didn't have electricity. We didn't have things that we could do at night. We didn't have 24-hour television. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have the technology and the freedom and the liberty to do whatever we wanted whenever we wanted. So we were sort of captured by the fact that we did stuff when the sun was up and we went to bed when the sun was down. And we ate things when the sun was around and we could do stuff, but when the sun went down, we didn't eat. Today, we can do anything we want. And even though we can do anything we want, it's not best for circadian rhythm and for all of these things that are perfectly tuned in the genetics of our body to do what we need to do. I'll just give you an example. I was talking for a conference, and I was staying at a hotel, and the breakfast at the hotel was not in the hotel. It was right across the parking lot at a Denny's. Now, I don't want to rag on Denny's, but I walked into Denny's, and up on the board up there, it said these 4 things. Okay, get ready: breakfast, lunch, dinner, late night. Okay. Wow. Late night. So, I mean, that's probably where they made their margin, was late night. So here's the thing. This would never happen. This would never, ever happen. But this is exactly what it is. And so I think if we could couch the entire conversation that we're going to talk about today, it's, yes, we can do anything we want whenever we want, but maybe we ought to do it at certain times.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll say I'm a big analogy person. So I give respect for analogies. So I love the highway analogy. I've used lots of analogies to describe the need for restorative repair and regrouping in terms of like cleaning and things of that nature. But I love the concept of the highway because it's so true, right? When you need that construction work to happen to clean up the debris on the highway that's there that can lead to accidents and everything else. And so we have all these things that accumulate. And, obviously the conversation can dovetail into truly the impact. My son is 15, my daughter is 17, and you look at the idea of staying up late to study and whether or not there's real learning occurring and whether or not that learning, that recall, even if you're okay on the test, do you have the recall 48 hours later, where studies have shown that perhaps you don't, when you lose your sleep. So such power in the area of sleep and restoration.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think that, you can expand on this, but when it comes to learning and memory, that happens when we sleep. That's actually when things are stored away. So if you cram, like I did, I was a master crammer in college and even a little bit in med school. I learned pretty quick there not to try that. But you don't remember things long term. So 3 months later, you're going to remember a lot less. And so I think for parents watching this, what is important is that if you really want to have good students, they actually really do need to have a very good sleep lifestyle.
Yeah, and I believe that people are starting to understand this. I don't agree everything with what they do in Sacramento, but one of the things that they've done is that they have ordered that high schools start an hour later than what they used to. And it's because teenagers, God love them, we have them, right? They typically are shifted a little bit later. So they tend to go to bed a little bit later, and they tend to wake up a little bit later, as we all know. And but that kind of shifts back as you get older and later. There's kind of a circadian interesting effect there. But it's really important that we get enough sleep. And the part that we're going to cut off is not the part in the morning when the alarm clock gets off. We're going to do that. We're going to have to get up at the same time. We're cutting it off at the beginning of night. And there's some evidence, actually there's a lot of evidence, that those first hours of sleep that happen before midnight, generally speaking, these are the hours that are very rich in slow wave sleep, otherwise known as deep sleep. This is the type of sleep that gives rise to something, hormone that's secreted from the brain, the pituitary gland, that has so many good effects, especially in young people that are growing up. They call it growth hormone for a good reason. We wish that as adults, we would get more growth hormone. We'd feel a lot better if we did. And where do we get that? We get that in the beginning of the night, in those first hours of sleep. In fact, there's an old expression that I'm sure all of you have on the tip of your tongue. The most important hours of sleep are the ones that you get before midnight. 2 hours of sleep before midnight is worth more than 4 hours of sleep after midnight.
I love that. I love that. And you bring up, there's one concept that I was reading several books, and I was telling my wife, she was like, well, yeah, obviously I know this, and everyone knows that. And just the fact that, we're all built slightly different, and some people are late risers and others are early risers, but society conforms to early risers, typically in terms of the construct, except for those who work the evening shifts and so forth. And that may play a substantial role between the combination in terms of individuals who are forced into a particular slot of living life and working and everything else like that. But I'm not sure that there's an answer or solution to that from a societal standpoint.
Well, it's interesting. I believe that they call them night owls and morning larks, right? The morning larks tend to get up early, and the night owls tend to go to bed late and get up late. I would suggest this, that those night owls that tend to stay up, it's not necessarily part of their genetics. It may be because of the behavior that they are doing. So we talk about staying up late, watching television, looking at the iPhone, smartphones, things of this nature. There is something that does to your circadian rhythm. So when you're staying up late and looking at light, not only does that light that's hitting the eye shut down melatonin production in the pineal gland in the brain, which is very useful, by the way, but it also tells the brain, it says to the brain this: hey, it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm still seeing light. Okay. So what you're doing essentially is you're tricking the brain into thinking that it's still daytime. And when that happens, the circadian rhythm is going to adjust itself, thinking that it's off. So in other words, the circadian rhythm is going to delay itself. And so that you will feel sleepier later at night, turning yourself basically into a night owl. And you do that by exposing your eyes to bright light in the evening. The way you can reverse that is actually by doing the opposite, is exposing your eyes to bright light early in the morning when you're getting up and avoiding light exposure at night. And if you do that, I will say that 90% of your night owls will turn into morning larks.
Wow. Well, I think we should jump into really get into the crux of the matter. We know that when you don't sleep, there's increased, you become like insulin insensitive. There's higher risk of cancers. I was reading one study where like the natural killer cells, actually, I don't know, I remember if it was the number or their potency don't work as well. So there's an increased risk of cancer. One of the things we talk about a lot on our show are health disparities among minority populations and the broader population. And many of these diseases actually overlap. Talk to us a little bit about how sleep can contribute to diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, I see a number of my patients. Some of them are financially challenged and they have to do two jobs. They're not getting enough sleep. When they have to do one or two things here and then do 3 or 4 things on the other end, it's always sleep that suffers. And so right there off the bat, these are the people that are going to run into issues with their health later on. We know this from shift workers, people who have to take the night shift. These are jobs that people don't typically want to get. because it's not convenient. But some people like them, but most people don't. They take these night shift work, and of course they're not sleeping at all. And what happens is that they take the job with the idea that they're going to be awake during the day. So really, when is the sleep happening? For people who have night shift work, they go in at 7:00 p.m. and they come out at 7 a.m. They got to do everything that a normal person does, except they got to switch the P and the M, the PM and the AM. So in other words, they get up at 7:00 or 6:00, 5:00 in the evening for their day to begin. They go in, they do their work, and when they come home, they really have to go into their bedroom. They got to seal off all the blinds. They got to make sure their room looks like it would at night, and they got to sleep for the same 7 hours. And if they're not doing that, they're going to have repercussions of chronic sleep deprivation. They cannot afford not to get sleep deprivation. So there's those people there. We're talking about people who have multiple jobs that don't get enough sleep, people who maybe are taking night shift work because that's the only job available to them. What about people who are let's say they're in the city, right? A lot of times the only place that you can find work is in the city, and it's hard to sleep in the city. I remember, I live out here in the country, pretty much up here in the hills of Yucaipa. And when I go in on a trip and I've got to go sleep in a hotel downtown, man, the amount of ambulance noises and sirens and things going on, it's actually very disturbing to actually try to go to sleep in that kind of a situation.
Yeah, I think that right there may play a role, because what's interesting is that there are there are sleep disparities between racial groups, which kind of struck me a little odd until I started thinking about it just a little bit more in depth, and then it made sense, just like what you said. So if I'm an individual who has to live in the inner city, and there's the noises of the as they call them, the ghetto birds, the helicopters going by, the sirens, the noises that are there, the lights that are blaring. Having to work particular hours in the evening time too as well. All those things play a role in terms of my inability to sleep, which is significant and increase the burden. And I think about, but it's not just those individuals, right? Because we have our healthcare workers who work at night, overnight, our nurses,
doctors,
doctors and
janitorial staff.
For years and years and years. I think of my father-in-law. He worked for years in the evening shift. Blood pressure through the roof high, never could sleep well. Led to kidney failure as a result of high blood pressure. And you wonder about the connection between the confluence of everything, the sleep, the nutrition, all of those things that played a role in terms of his disease burden. So it's significant.
Yep. And then you add to that, with weight gain comes sleep apnea. Probably one of the biggest barriers to getting a good night's sleep is not being able to breathe during sleep. And so looking for those signs, recent weight gain, people who snore, people who stop breathing at night, these are all signs of sleep apnea. And unless you get that corrected, you can provide the time to sleep, you can provide all of these things, but it's not going to get better unless you improve the quality of sleep. So making sure you're getting worked up for that. And for that, let's face it, you need to have some sort of insurance to be able to get it tested and then get the appropriate treatment for it.
Very good point.
That's I'm dealing with that with the patient right now. For the past year, he's been struggling just to have the insurance and the copay, to come up with the copay to get the sleep study. And we know he has sleep apnea that's affecting his heart. But you mentioned about the weight loss, and I think that is such a common theme and concern of all of America, right? And so speak to us a little bit about the whole confluence that happens as a result of sleep deprivation as someone's trying to lose weight. There's a lot of interesting data on that.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, if going back to that study where they did an all-nighter, just after one night, ghrelin and leptin, these sorts of enzymes became out of balance. These are the things that tells you when you're hungry, when you're full and satisfied. So really important things in terms of the thing that dictates what you eat. There's also some studies that show that when you're sleep deprived, you tend to gravitate toward more carbohydrate-rich foods. And that, of course, we know is not a good situation. When you have too many carbohydrates, we could get nerdy here and talk about, the carbohydrates goes into the cytosol, it gets broken down into pyruvate, and acetyl-CoA goes into the mitochondria. The bottom line is that when all of this stuff goes to something called the electron transport chain of the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell, this is where reactive oxygen species start to become generated. Reactive oxygen species are really bad things because they can break down your mitochondria. You're like, well, so what? Just the mitochondria. But in fact, mitochondrial dysfunction has been linked to a number of diseases, most of which are things that we have here in the United States. Dementia, diabetes, even learning disabilities and autism have been linked to mitochondrial diseases. So this weight loss and metabolic syndrome and mitochondrial dysfunction and eating are really intricately linked. And when you start to unravel and pull back the skin on this onion, there's been a lot of studies that have looked at the opposite of overeating, which is fasting, intermittent fasting. Notwithstanding, there's been a recent publication in the New England Journal of Medicine, which showed that intermittent fasting is not any better than just, reducing calories. Notwithstanding that, there is some data also published in the New England Journal of Medicine that ketones, which are the product of fasting, can really signal processes in the body that resensitize insulin, that reduce the amount of lipids and triglycerides and things of that nature. And so there's sort of a, Columbus, it's funny because whenever I prescribe a medication, I'll put it this way, whenever I prescribe a medication, I've always got to look up the side effect of that medication. Like in congestive heart failure, I'll give a patient Lasix, and that's going to help their heart and their lungs, but it's leveraging their kidneys to do that.
Absolutely.
When we're talking about a lot of the things that we're talking about today, like sleeping, fasting, exercise, they all have side effects, but all the side effects are good side effects. Like
exactly.
Depressed. It's amazing stuff. And so it's really hard to talk about one of these things and stay on task because they lead to so many other good things.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's one of the things I always tell everyone. I said, listen, our goal is to help you feel better and live longer, right? I said, so we start off with foundational truths. The foundational truths are the pillars of lifestyle. Those don't have side effects except for good side effects. Then we move to medications, which carry numerous side effects.
Right.
And then you move to procedures, surgery, and down the tier there. And so you're absolutely right. That foundational truth is so, so important. And it's hard to get folks to implement it,
Yeah, unless it's a pill that they can put in their mouth. I mean, I just saw a comment on one of my YouTube videos recently about sunlight, and about the point of the video is that you can't just take your vitamin D capsule and say that you're getting the benefits of sunlight. And they're like, oh, but if only we could just do that. And I'm like, well, it's not that way.
Yeah. No, and that's great. The part, so I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of your videos on there. Once again, you guys got to check them out on MedCram. And once again, this is Conversations with the Doctors, if you didn't know. So make sure you like and subscribe and share this video with other people. But one of the things that I haven't checked out that one, I promise I will do that this weekend. But one of the things that is phenomenal about sunlight is really about the activation, development of nitric oxide, the release of nitric oxide for your coronary arteries and your blood pressure. So powerful by being in the sun and having measured doses of it. And so there's so many additional benefits, whether or not it's for colon cancer prevention and all the variables that are there by true light, sunlight. So no, I'm assuming you touched on many of those things. And so that's
well, yeah, actually, very briefly on the nitric oxide aspect of it, what we kind of focused a little bit more on is melatonin. Actually, there's a paper that was just put out by Russell Ryder and Scott Zimmerman, who are pretty high up in the melatonin world, that is showing that, we always think of melatonin as a hormone of night. It comes from the pineal gland. But in fact, melatonin is produced in the mitochondria in orders of magnitude higher than what we see in the pineal gland. And their proposal, based on a lot of what they've seen and put together, is that it's near infrared radiation that's doing a lot of this. They're working out the details of how that happens, but they're tying it to near infrared radiation. This, Columbus, this is really where it hits the road here with what you're talking about, because here's the issue is, and this was Scott Zimmerman, who's an optic physicist, basically. He's an engineer, light engineer. And what they're finding, it's really fascinating, is if it's true that it's this near infrared radiation that's doing it, near infrared radiation is penetrating, because it's a low wavelength, is penetrating deep into the skin, hitting the mitochondria. But here's the part that blew me away when he said this. And this guy is not, he hasn't read a lot of the same health reform stuff that we have from the 1800s, but he's saying that leaves and trees grass. These things are innately enabled to reflect that near infrared radiation specifically to people. And if you look at the literature, we have ample amount of literature that shows the benefits of living and growing up in a rural environment where there's lots of trees and grass. And I can remember that this is one of the prerequisites of where a sanitarium should be is in nature, in the trees and the grass. This is where you're getting a lot of this near infrared radiation.
That's incredible. I definitely have to check out some of that literature that's there, because I mean, this is why I love science, right?
Yeah.
So, it's like, even if it's not our area of expertise in full, just the fact as you begin to break down and search and research and look at really the power that's there of all the things you've heard about, that you've read about, that you've been told in the past, and that there is really truly is power in terms of some of these basic fundamental activities that really are cost-free for most individuals.
Yeah.
One example of that, recently I was looking at, there's one guy, I think it's Matthew Walker, PhD. He's a neuroscientist, studies sleep, brilliant guy. And I was reading where he was talking about sleep is actually like therapy. And I mean, like, not psychotherapy, but behavioral health therapy, because of what happens when you sleep. It turns off norepinephrine in the brain and disassociates us from traumatic events emotionally, so that you can remember the event without the emotion. And there's even a pill that came out. I think the VA is already using it and the FDA has approved it, that can help do this. But sleep naturally does this. Yeah. And this is why, we've always heard, time will heal all wounds when it comes to emotional wounds. But it turns out it's actually sleep that does that. It's actually, I don't remember if it was the NREM sleep or REM sleep, but it was one stage of sleep where this actually happens. And again, going back to the health disparities, this is profound, because if you don't get enough sleep, you don't get into those stages of sleep, you don't get this opportunity to disassociate, remove some of the stress. Someone who doesn't sleep and is traumatized winds up having chronic stress from two different angles. And I thought that was profound and a big part of why sleep is so important.
Yeah, the other thing that again, we're gonna have a hard time staying on topic here, because you just said something that made me think about something else, which is exercise. Exercise is one of those things. If you're not sleeping well at night and you want to sleep better at night, exercise is one of those things that can really help. Maybe not so much exercising right before you go to bed, but exercising at some point during the day. And I can tell you that when I say the word exercise, there's a lot of people in the audience immediately in their mind, they're thinking of 24-hour fitness. They're thinking about the Olympics. They're thinking about all these things. No, there's something in exercise physiology called the J curve. And the J, it kind of looks like a Nike symbol, if you want to think about what a Nike symbol looks like. And if you start at the very beginning of that J curve, that's you sitting on the couch. As soon as you start to move down that J curve, that's you getting off the couch doing something. This is what's happening to stress. This is what's happening to inflammatory cytokines. This is what's happening to depression. All of this stuff is going down and it's improving. Now, there comes a point where you start to over exert yourself. Then stress levels can start to come up. And then, obviously at the very top, you've got the marathon runners who are under tremendous amounts of stress, tremendous amounts of cytokines, and it's a wonder they don't get sick more often. But the point I want to make is that getting off the couch, getting outside into sunshine, fresh air, and doing just something as simple as walking or gardening, that's the kind of exercise I'm talking about when I'm saying exercise. It doesn't have to be, running a few miles a day on a daily basis. That's always cool, but that's exactly what it is that I'm talking about. And the other aspect that Eric, you just reminded me of is there's a study that they did where they took women who had PTSD. Okay, so this is kind of the thing what you were talking about, is that coupling of emotion and the norepinephrine. And what they did was they took these women that already had PTSD. They subjected them to a test where they would flash something up on a screen and give them a little bit of an electric shock. I know, what kind of a study is this, right? So they would associate this shape with this shock, and they would get like, every time they saw that shape, they would get like, they'd flinch. And then for a day, they showed them the shock, or so they showed them the shape without the shock, And in half of them, they had them exercise. And in the other half, they didn't have them exercise. Well, when the study was almost near completion, what they found was that in those women who had PTSD and they associated the shape with the shock and they had exercised in extinction, they had less PTSD based on that shape than those women that did not exercise. And the conclusion was that not only is sleep important in getting rid of that PTSD type of connection, but also exercise is important. And guess what? Exercise makes you sleep better. And maybe that's the connection.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, it's so powerful because at the center point of everything is the amygdala, right? And that's the center where we house all these fears and this. And we see that sleep impacts the amygdala. We see exercise impacts the amygdala and lessens it, which is so it's insane. So in various aspects, so whether or not you're looking at prayer or meditation, whether or not you're looking at exercise, whether or not you're looking at various aspects of intimacy, as you said, Roger, all these things, they begin to kind of intertwine. And you start to see this interrelationship between a holistic approach towards the way we live life, just in general, and the power that can arise as a result of that.
Yeah. Now you're talking about you're talking about health disparities. Immediately thought of something called forest bathing. Have you heard of forest bathing?
Yes, that's a big thing now.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you go to certain communities, forest bathing is a big. I'm sure if you went to some highfalutin art display in San Francisco, people would know exactly what you're talking about when you said forest bathing. But if you were to go downtown, at some place and say forest bathing, they wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about. And then that's what I'm talking about. There's a kind of a health disparity. So this is the thing, is people going out into the forest, going out into nature. There are these they're called phytosides, which are aromatic compounds which come off of these trees, pines, firs, all these sorts of things. And when you simply inhaling them, when your body detects these things, it causes immune changes in your body. This is real. This sounds like it's kind of crazy stuff, but it's real. In fact, this is really popular in Japan. They took a bunch of Japanese in Tokyo CEOs. These are business people at the top of their food chain. Okay, they're in these high-rise buildings in downtown Tokyo. Don't know what companies they were, and they took them out to the Hinoki cypress forest in the mountains outside of Tokyo. And they had them stay up there for 3 or 4 days. They checked their blood. They checked all sorts of immune function. They looked at how many cells there were, how many granules were in the cells, these white blood cells. And at the end of it, basically what they found was that having them walk around in the forest for a couple of days, just by the end of the first day, certainly second day, there was increases in natural killer cells, increases in the granules inside these natural killer cells. And it worked great. They also captured the air and they measured the phytosides. Okay, so that's the first experiment. Second experiment, they took these guys in Tokyo and now they just put them into a hotel in downtown Tokyo. But now they infused in the room, using these essential oil diffusers in the room, the same phytosides that they were getting up in the forest. And you know what? They had the same reaction. They had the same response to walking around in the forest as they did in their hotel room in downtown Tokyo, except for one thing. Here's the one thing that was different. In the forest, they measured urinary cortisol levels. Urinary cortisol is a measure of stress. Those urinary cortisol levels were nice and low, okay? But in the hotel room in downtown Tokyo, they were still elevated. So you can take the scent out of nature, but you can't take the nature out of the, you know what I'm saying? There's still a benefit to getting out there into nature.
Yes.
That's powerful.
Man, I have to bring this up because it's Earth Day, right? So it's April 22. It's my niece's birthday, and it's also Earth Day. And so we look at the state of our planet, the state of our planet and the forests, their deforestation. And as we talk about forest bathing, we talk about all the benefits from the transmission of these phytosides and everything of that sort. What are we doing in our planet for our ecosystem where we are integrated with it, and the impact? It's one thing already that we've removed ourselves and we're inside big cities and we're with smog, pollution, noise, and lights on the 24/7 basis. But now when we begin this process, what's the potential impact and domino effect for our health long term and for the next generations?
Yeah, and I'll just add one point to that is they found the effects of this phytocides in the forest. It lasted for about 7 days.
Wow. So just one Sabbath afternoon hike is enough weekly.
It certainly is enough, at least in that department. Yes.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, our neighborhood is in a forest basically, so we have bears and everything going through. So I forest bathe by default, not even
so the bears may raise your urinary cortisol level.
Exactly.
You know what? We have New England black bears. They're actually very nice. As long as you don't mess with their cubs, they're actually very gracious. They stop, they look at you, they don't bother you. I've run into a few of them.
Don't go pet them though. Come on, Dr. Walsh. Don't go petting them though.
You don't have to worry about me petting a bear.
You will have a fight or flight
dog,
response.
Not a bear. I do want to. One of the key things I think we need to get out of this conversation tonight, having you on, being that you're board certified in sleep medicine, is what a really we mentioned exercise. How do we get more sleep? That's my thing, and maybe I'm just trained myself. It almost doesn't matter what time I go to bed. I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. If I go to bed at 2 o'clock, if I go to bed at 10 o'clock, I wake up at the same time. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do I get more sleep? And how do I improve the quality of my sleep? But mostly more sleep. I think that's really the first step.
Okay, so for all of those who, and for everybody it's different, but if you go to YouTube and type in MedCram and then insomnia, I have a whole hour talk on this, but let me juice that whole hour talk right now for you, basically what it is. The first thing you got to make sure is that you don't have a medical problem that's actually keeping you from sleeping. So some people have a lot of pain. Some people have sleep apnea. If you got, people have a large prostate that's preventing you from sleeping, these are all things that you need to take care of to do that. So let's get rid of that for just a second. Second thing is, a lot of times if we have insomnia, the problem is that it builds on itself. Let me give you an example. A death happens in the family, or something happens, something that would normally give you insomnia naturally. And then what happens is you're like, you know what? I need to get more sleep. So I'm going to go to bed earlier. What happens when you go to bed earlier and your circadian rhythm is not ready for you to fall asleep? You don't fall asleep. And then you start getting real concerned about it, and you start to associate your bedroom with you being unable to fall asleep. And that causes anxiety. And that's a big problem. Now, whenever you walk into your bedroom, which is where you're supposed to sleep, it's like you're walking onto Carnegie Hall stage and you're about to play a piano concerto. You get a lot anxious and you can't fall asleep. That's the worst thing. So never stay in the bedroom if you can't fall asleep. Secondly is, get rid of everything in your bedroom that has nothing to do with either sleep or the other thing that we do in your bedroom. Okay. So get rid of the television. Don't work in your bedroom. Get rid of your laptop computer. Don't work, don't eat, any of that. It's all got to go. I want to have it so that when you walk into your bedroom, your subconscious has absolutely no question in its mind that it's time to go to sleep. Yeah. The other thing that I find helpful is a routine. So getting into a routine, this kind of winds you down. Do not turn on Fox News. Do not turn on MSNBC. Do not turn on CNN. I'm not being political. I'm just talking about news in general. It's never good. It's not going to be a lullaby, and you're not going to be going to sleep. Don't watch those things. Turn it off. It's not good for your eyes anyway. And the important thing is, after 9 o'clock, turn down your lights. Like, I know a guy who's really into this stuff, and he turns down his lights so low that people that go over to his house, they almost like trip and fall over themselves. So turning down the lights is going to increase your brain's ability to make melatonin. And melatonin is what tells your body it's time to shut down. It's time to go to sleep. If none of that works and you're having issues, see your physician. Sleeping pills are great for acute insomnia. And if you want to get it over, it shouldn't really go for more than 4 to 6 weeks. But the problem is with a lot of sleeping pills is they're abused, and people use them for a long period of time. If you're on sleeping pills and that's what you take, I would talk to your doctor about it. But it's not the first thing that I would do, because if I stop people's sleeping pills, then they can't sleep. Now they have no confidence that they're going to go to sleep, and then they have even more anxiety. So really what I do, it's a complicated way that I go through it. But the key is to encourage sleep and to make sure that people are not associating their bedroom with the anxiety of not being able to fall asleep.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you think about the temperature, about your core temperature? I've read some studies on the core temperature and trying to lower it, and
Mhm.
relaxation either in the bath or a shower before, so you can kind of increase your pores and drop your core temperature down and turn the temperature in your room down a little bit there. Throw the blankets off.
So
Any thoughts on that?
what I understand is that let's say your temperature's here, what you want to do is actually have it go up, and then have it as it's falling down. That helps you to go to sleep. Your temperature nadir, the lowest body core temperature is going to be around 4 o'clock in the morning. So having a cooler bedroom is actually better for some people. Let me tell you a personal experience I had. I have a spa, a jacuzzi, and I love to go in that. I heat that thing up to as hot as it can go, and I go in at night, and I typically sleep pretty well after that. But for the first time, I actually got to go into a sauna. Not my sauna; it was at a friend's house, and I went into that sauna, and I'd never been in a sauna. But boy, we had this really deep spiritual discussion. You know how it is when you're having this discussion; the time just keeps going, right?
Yeah.
That thing was heated up to like 190 degrees. I had never been in there. And maybe because I was in the spa for a number of years, I was able to tolerate it. But I went in and out into the shower. I had never slept better in my life after I did that sauna. I mean, I was out cold. I had never slept that well. So I believe there is something to doing something really hot, like right before you go to bed, and then allowing yourself to cool off. It's that cooling off that I think beneficial. Signals to the body that it's time to go to sleep. It may be just anecdotal, but I'll tell you, I've never slept so good after doing a sauna.
I've seen, I can't recall right now in great detail, a piece written about that.
Yeah,
I experienced something very similar in Jamaica, actually, but I went through the hot and the cold and the hot again and slept like a baby, completely like a baby. Now, what about the over the counter? So, there's a huge market for melatonin out there. Obviously over the counter supplements, different quantities are actually contained inside of it, but melatonin and even Benadryl. Any thoughts on those things that people ingest?
So I hate Benadryl. It's an anticholinergic. It's really bad for elderly people because it can, there's actually some evidence that it can cause dementia if it's used for a long period of time. Anything with anticholinergics in it, it's going to cause something very similar. Antihistamines, like I sometimes have bad allergies and I'll take a pill if it's really bad, and that just knocks you out. Histamine is one of those neurotransmitters that keeps your brain alert and awake during the day. So antihistamine is going to suppress that. Trazodone, that's not an over-the-counter, that's kind of a prescription medication. A lot of these are not FDA approved, and I probably would not recommend it. What about melatonin? So melatonin is interesting. Melatonin works best actually for sleep when it's given in low doses. In my experience, people take way too high of a dose of melatonin. They're taking 5 to 10 milligrams at night. That's way too high. It should be more like 1 to 3 milligrams. And in fact, you will actually notice more efficacy when you give a lower dose than when you give a too high of a dose. You saturate the receptor. So 1 to 3 milligrams at most. Make sure that you're getting a reputable brand, because as you mentioned and alluded to, Columbus, is some of these things, when they test it, they don't even really have the stuff that they have in it. So maybe getting it from a country where it's actually regulated. In the United States, melatonin is not regulated. It's considered a nutritional supplement. So just be careful.
Now you can also, I've read that you can get melatonin from pistachios. And then just like 2 pistachios actually has like the right dose of melatonin. I do, before getting on a plane, well, that's one of the things they said that you can take if you want to try and sleep on a plane is just simple pistachios. I could look that up to prove it, but I've read it before and a couple times, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that could be. Melatonin is actually produced. This is interesting. Melatonin is actually produced naturally in the body from serotonin, and serotonin is produced from the essential amino acid tryptophan. Interestingly, tryptophan is one of those things that they said for a long time is high in turkey. And of course, after Thanksgiving, people eat a lot of turkey. So, is there a connection? No. I wouldn't recommend eating turkey, especially at night if you want to try to go to sleep.
All right.
Unless you want to come see me in the morning, but
Yes.
And what about and morning time is a lot of time when people, extending. Is there any secret? I would assume exercise is probably the best way to extend the back end of sleeping and just having time to sleep, because so many of us are on such a rigid schedule.
Yeah, so that's the problem, is whatever your schedule is during the week, I would highly recommend keeping it on the weekend. If you have to sleep in till 10 o'clock on the weekends to make up for the lack of sleep that you had during the week, then the problem is not on the weekend. The problem is during the week. Right. And then there's a compounding of that problem, by the way, is that when you sleep in till 10 o'clock on the weekend, your retina is missing out on that bright light in the morning, and it's what we call kind of like a social jet lag. So you're not entraining your circadian rhythm well with the sun in the morning, and as a result of that, you become even more jet lagged because you're not exposing your eyes to the bright light until late, and therefore you tend to get up later, and therefore you're going to stay awake later, and then Monday morning, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks because you're going to bed late on Sunday night and you're getting up at 5 or 6 in the morning. So really try to do something that's sustainable that you can do on a daily basis.
That's good. That's good. All right, I'm going to hit you with a kind of rapid fire, a couple of questions here too as well, because I see this a lot in my clinic where folks ask me, hey, doc, you know what? Isn't red wine good for me? And it's good to help me sleep and it's good for my heart. Tell us about alcohol and sleep.
So that substance is actually naturally found in grape skin. You can have grapes and get the same benefit. In fact, Columbus, as you probably know, the American Heart Association has finally removed that recommendation completely from its website, and that's no longer recommended. But I'm telling the expert that. So
no.
But alcohol actually messes with your sleep quality.
Yes,
it does the opposite. People sleep, but it's like Benadryl. It's just at the kind of the front of the frontal cortex, the deeper, more important types of sleep you don't actually get. It's like it turns off your consciousness, but doesn't really allow you to get the proper kind of sleep. And this is an unfortunate thing I see a lot of times. People think, well, I'm taking 2 drinks, doc, to help my sleep. And I'm like, this is why you're having all these other problems, because you're not actually getting good sleep when you do that.
Yeah, the problem with alcohol is that it's extremely short acting. And so it will put people to sleep. That's what they know. Yeah, if I need to fall asleep, it'll go to sleep. But it wears off within an hour, and now it's actually exciting you so much that you can't fall asleep for the rest of the night.
Yeah. The other big one we have to mention is caffeine.
Yes.
Thank you. It blocks adenosine in the brain, and because of that, you feel awake, and there's like a buildup, I think, of adenosine throughout the day to help you make you feel sleepy. And caffeine stops that, so it's a very unnatural way to get energy. So you think you're getting all this energy. In one of my talks recently, I think you were at the church in Lansing, Michigan as well recently, and I showed Coca-Cola advertisements of how Coca-Cola, you say, we give you all of this energy, and all these, this is from like in the 1920s, but what they were doing is really cheating you and tricking you. And caffeine still does that today. And because of its half-life, it really messes up the quality of sleep. And it's one of the major reasons I think many of these sleep-related diseases actually occur. It's caffeine.
Eric, you're exactly right. I mean, caffeine is a adenosine receptor blocker, and it's your body's natural ability to detect when you're fatigued. And what you're doing is essentially you're putting a black tape over that red light on your dash, telling you that there's a problem in the engine. Caffeine is basically ripping black tape and putting it on the dashboard. That's all it does.
Yeah.
Love it. So our top three things for people to remember in order to get great sleep are what? What are the top 3 things you want them to take home points?
So here are the top 3 things, and I say this not in terms of efficacy, but in terms of prevalence of the problem, is turning off lights after 9 o'clock and getting into bed. Okay, I'll quote somebody. This turning of night into day is a wretched, health-destroying habit. I think I'm quoting it word for word there because I've read it so many times. So turning the lights off after 9 and getting into bed is going to do a tremendous amount of benefit. The other side of that, the flip side of the coin, is when you get up in the morning, getting outside, specifically getting physically outside and seeing that sun come up and allowing that light to hit the retina and grounding your circadian rhythm in the in the place that where you are, so that your body's circadian rhythm is grounded in where you need to be. So those are the first two things. Second of all, third of all, I would say is making sure that you're getting 7 hours of sleep. Okay. And if you're going to bed after 9 o'clock, the chances are you're going to get at least 7 hours of sleep per night. The temptation is to do stuff after 10 o'clock at night, 9 or 10, because you still have stuff to do. It would be better for you to go to sleep and get up earlier in the morning and do that same stuff, because the brain is not designed to be doing brain stuff at that night hour. You will find that you'll be able to do things much more quickly and with better cognitive power in the morning. So the top three things are: number one, making sure you're getting at least 7 hours of sleep. Number two, making sure the lights are off after 9 o'clock. Number three, getting up in the morning and going outside and getting your eyes exposed to bright light in the morning.
Love it. Love it. Man, Roger, I'm feeling sleepy right now. It's too early though. This is good stuff. This is really good stuff. I think, this is an epidemic. So I think this content, for those of you who did not hear, go to MedCram and check out the insomnia lecture that Roger did. Extremely powerful. It's going to be important. I'm going to listen to it this weekend myself as well. But I think this is what the world needs to hear. It's what my patients need to hear for sure, as it relates to the power of sleep. So we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, very helpful. As I said, it's very helpful. Definitely want to encourage everyone to go to MedCram. We're seeing the COVID numbers tick back up again. And, they just reversed the ban of the masks on planes. And so we don't know what all that might do. We might see more COVID cases here coming up. Make sure to go to MedCram. There's some excellent information on battling COVID naturally and boosting the immune system to be able to fight this virus that just does not seem to want to go away.
Yeah. We may have to have you back, Roger, just to kind of dedicate a complete show talking about COVID and infectious, and we can mirror in what happens to your immune system with exercise and with sleep and with nutrition and really kind of speak to the folks.
Hydrotherapy,
Yes. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, listen, appreciate you. There's been another great conversation. Appreciate those of you who have tuned in. Make sure you share and like this YouTube channel. Go and support Dr. Seheult on MedCram. Check out the light lecture. Check out the insomnia lecture as well. All right. It's been good. We look forward to seeing everyone coming up in the next month or so, right, Eric?
Yep.
What's our next show that we have coming up? Not sure, but it's gonna be something good.
Maybe I need more sleep.
It's gonna be good. All right, Roger, stay on board for just a moment. We'll see you all soon. Take care.